Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. I have my complexity guru on tap this morning, Willy Donaldson. If you have not listened to the episode Simple Complexity, please make sure that you do that. Let's have you introduce yourself really quickly, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Scott, thanks for having me. And again, you know my background. My father introduced me to all of the systems thinking texts back before I even went to high school. And I often wonder whether that was for punishment or enlightenment, but I take it as enlightenment. And so I come at the world from having run many complex systems, thought about it from a leadership perspective. And that's why I think we connect so deeply. And I see how both liberating and humbling leadership can be. And I try to approach the world that way. And what I've found and why I responded to your post was that a lot of people conflate complexity theory and systems thinking. And I think there's a very clear, in my mind, distinction about them. And maybe we can spend some time talking about that.
The impetus of this was I did a post on LinkedIn, and I think it was called Problem Solving and Complexity, and rooted in this article by Snowden and Boone, Harvard Business Review, their Cynefin model. And you've got clear problems, complicated problems, complex problems, and then chaotic problems. And at least how I framed it for listeners. And for listeners, we'll put a link to the infographic in the show notes so you have a sense of what's going on. When I'm working with groups, I talk about the need to set the environment, right? Do we have psychological safety? Do we have clear norms of how we're going to rumble with respect, is what kind of Brene Brown would say. But do we have the right decision-making environment where people feel like they can bring their voice to the table? Because oftentimes no one person has the answer, or there isn't an answer. It's what's our best guess. And then do we have a clear process of how we navigate these complex adaptive challenges? Different scholars call them different things, but do we have a decision-making process? And then I think I highlighted Jensen Huang, and Jeff Bezos famously talks about how he navigates some of these types of problems. Now, Willy, I'm super interested in hearing your perspective now.
All of that is terrific. And the infographic is spectacular for understanding complexity. The challenge that I would throw out to leaders and managers universally is, are we all viewing the complexity the same way? Sengi famously said we have to have common mental models and common language. And an example you may remember from my book, working with a very well-known government contractor that a board member asked me to go in and talk to because he thought they were struggling with project management.
Yeah.
I got the senior team selected. We sat down, 7 of us, the CEO, the CTO, it's all the C-suite. And I said, this board member seems to think you're struggling with project management. Before I could even finish that sentence, somebody said, it's not project management we struggle with, it's program management. One other person said, they're the same thing. Another person said, no, they're not. So I stopped them and I said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, get a piece of paper and write down your mental model and your language for project management, 7 different models.
Wow.
And any one of those models would work and help each individual understand the complexity, but without a shared mental model and common language of those, they talked past each other. So somebody's getting a raise in San Diego for doing something that somebody in Norfolk is getting fired for.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's what I see is the difference, is making sure that, yes, it's complex, and systems thinking is never going to make that go away if it's a complex adaptive system, but it helps you get oriented to it. And then again, that common language, common mental model is just critically important. Another example, I was brought in by a debtor in possession financing deal that went south, and the financiers brought us in to clean it up. And they brought in a whole bunch of turnaround specialists from top companies, Procter & Gamble, IBM, et cetera, all unbelievably intelligent, great stuff. But the product marketing department and the engineering department used a different stage gate product development process with different deliverables and different models and different language, and then blamed each other for why they couldn't come together.
I want to make sure we're on the same page. So in the world of Bezos and Amazon, they're going to have the memo, right? They're going to have the memo that they all pause, they all read for about 20 minutes or whatever it is. It takes a long time to write the memo, but that's Bezos trying to get everyone into the same space. So that's what you're saying. And that's what the infographic probably has missing from it is, are we all defining things? Are we all seeing things? Are we all working the same problem?
Yep, exactly. And a lot of my work has been on corporate universities, Scott, and a lot of leaders and business owners struggle with that term. They think, I don't have 30 acres and $1 billion. It's setting up your internal learning process to make sure that you do have common language and common mental models. So my brother-in-law had a small manufacturing firm in New Jersey, and same problems, people talking past one another. And we just set up his corporate university. It was in a 10 by 10 break room, a shared learning library that they could take out text and then pictures of the common processes and common models. And until we got to that, they all struggled with what somebody would think was complex and somebody else thought was trivial. So they think that person is not intelligent. No, they're very intelligent. They just may not have the intelligence to understand that mental model.
Yeah. I was with a group this week where I think it was a senior team, and in the course of the conversation, it was really fascinating because one individual said, I thought that was a priority. And the other individual said, I thought this was the priority. And they were at odds because and then it gets personal at times. That person is difficult. The R&D individuals, look, I'm trying to move forward on all these things. And now this has been brought into the picture. And then the operations individual is concerned that we aren't on the same page of what our priorities are. This is an EOS organization. They're doing the work, but it's not easy.
No, you've probably seen it, is leaders have to understand they are the system architect, and they have to be the one that senses those and also follows through. They're the only ones who can negotiate and square those kinds of challenges. So in another example, I was brought in to a very large, again, government contractor, 5 different divisions, and the president was driving digital transformation. But she refused to negotiate and mitigate the differences between the platforms. She just turned it over to the IT department and said, oh, no, just make everybody do it the way we want. Okay, the department cannot change incentives and cannot decide on budgets and those sorts of things.
So how do you help organizations get to that place? I gave you a simple example of kind of Bezos, but your radar's up and you're looking from the very start. Are people defining this the same way? Are they seeing it through the same lens? Talk a little bit about that. What are the red flags that, okay, here's a little bit of a challenge out of the gates?
Yeah, it's just exactly what you say, the different priorities in different departments. And you just start to see or misplaced incentives that have somebody doing the wrong thing. You are a student of W. Edwards Deming, and he believed that upwards of 94% of all the mistakes, falls, flaws, misunderstandings, defects were systemic. People wanted to do the right things. And if you've hired good people, they typically want to do the right thing, but they're led to do the wrong things. One of the infographics talks about engagement and really making sure they understand the strategy and they understand the priorities and the trade-offs, and they can speak truth to power. And if you don't have those systemic elements in place, it's going to be problematic. And yet often in the absence of system thinking, people create a market for villains. They're frustrated, they're overworked, and those damn people in sales or those stupid engineers. And you've seen it.
Yep.
I see it all the time.
Yep.
I had an engineer working for me one time, and he was complaining about those stupid customers. They have all these problems. They keep calling. And I said, why don't you go out and spend some time with them? I gave him a plane ticket, and he went out and sat with him. He came back. He said, wow, our software stinks. So
talk more about the system architect. I really like that phrasing for the leader.
Yeah. Again, if you look at the canonical model of a system, inputs into the system, a black box, and outputs, the CEO has to be, or the exec has to be the system architect, because if there are problems, it's the system. You've got to understand the whole has to come together. And if you don't approach it that way, you'll almost always use bounded rationality and optimize in what you think is best, sales, finance, et cetera. But a lot of CEOs don't like that position. You don't have to be brilliant in all of them, but you have to listen and you have to be humble before the system and look for the system dynamics that are throwing things off.
Yeah, and Heifetz often talks about treating adaptive challenges like technical problems. And I think you're getting to that a little bit. Our minds want to find a villain or want to find a simple, quick, this will make it go away. If we just put billboards up along the highway, then people will come,
Exactly. And it's why people don't like systems thinking. Russell Lakoff said that managers and leaders don't solve problems, they manage messes. That doesn't sound like much fun, and we all want to solve the problem. Imagine an elected official saying, I want to just manage the mess. I want to spend my time with really hard trade-offs and upsetting half the people. No one ever says that, but that's the reality. And part of system thinking is to get you to realize there's always trade-offs in the systems and always compromises that you have to make. Yeah. But most leaders don't like that and haven't been trained like that. And I'm big, I'm bad, I can just force this through.
What else comes to mind as you think about the infographic? Is there anything else that, I love that addition, Willy, and I'm going to, in the next version of it, put that version out in the world. And was there anything else that you think is a nuance, or just when your critical eye looked at it that you thought, wow, this resource would benefit from?
I might actually put in a graphic about mental models and common language, because I think a lot of complexity is often in the eye of the beholder. But if they understood all of the mental model of how that fits in with them, they might very well have that conversation. Yeah. They're not ignorant people, but they just don't see the whole system. And so those mental models and common language are so powerful.
And I think at times, if I'm not taking the time to truly empathize and learn what it is that this individual, the CFO, what are the constraints and the demands and the frustrations and the challenges that individual is navigating. And then again, to your classic kind of R&D versus sales kind of conundrum, what are the different constraints and challenges? And I'm just looking at it through my lens. It's a recipe for challenge, right?
And you probably have watched the show Undercover Boss. And notice how many times the boss is like, wow, I had no idea that was going on. And so that's seeing the system and making sure everybody sees the system, because Herbert Simon's bounded rationality. If you don't see the whole system, you're going to draw a boundary around your job, accounting, finance, whatever it is, and you're going to start optimizing in that space. And that may be great for finance, but it may be disastrous for the whole system.
It reminds me of the blind men and the elephant.
The Sufi model, yeah. Yeah, so it's blind men looking at an elephant, and one is holding the ear and thinks that this must be a carpet, and one is holding the trunk and thinks this must be a hose, and the other's holding a leg, and this has to be a tree. And if you don't see the whole thing, they're going to complete the story. They're going to complete the picture. Oh, this is a tree I'm holding on to. if they don't see the whole elephant. And so that's what, if you bring somebody into accounting, you bring a high-powered finance person into your organization, and you don't give them the caution that, hey, you can't just optimize finance, you got to optimize the whole system. They may very well just optimize for finance.
So would one intervention with this senior team that I'm working with, would a potential intervention be to challenge the senior leaders to spend some time with some of these other individuals and experience their world for a day? And it feels trite because it's just a day, but is it better than nothing? How do you think about that?
Well, I was asked by a very large financial institution to come in, and it's interesting, Scott. I posed these questions to the collected group, I think it was 86 folks, and I said, is your company a system? And all the hands went up. Absolutely. Is your department a system? Is your company a subsystem of the holding company? Absolutely. All the way down. Is your department, is your team, all the way down, everybody use the word system. I said, how many of you have ever studied systems thinking or systems engineering or systems dynamics? 3 hands went up. Yeah. And so people talk about systems, but they don't really understand how powerful they are. So then getting them to, I love the old adage, is walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Go sit with the person in operations that you just said was an idiot.
There's that Japanese phrase, and I'm not going to say it exactly correctly, Genji Genbutsu, go and see.
Yes, and that's why I love the concept in systems thinking of in-scoping and out-scoping. Wherever you are, out-scope, step back, look and see where those artificial boundaries drop away and you see what's really going on, or in-scope and go find out what's working. And so getting yourself, I use the John Boyd's OODA loop all the time. First observe really closely and get yourself oriented, because as Boyd himself pointed out, if you do not observe carefully and get yourself oriented, you may be disoriented. And that's a terrible position from which to make decisions and act.
Especially if you're a fighter pilot.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're a CEO or a CFO for that matter.
Who are some C-level executives today that people may know that you respect, that you think do a nice job of kind of thinking in this way?
Yeah, one that jumps to mind immediately is Tim Cook. I think does a very good job in this fashion. Many people will not know her, but a friend of mine at the Rockefeller Foundation, Sarah Farley, is just great at it. So most of the ones I know that really think about this, I don't see it a lot publicly.
Yeah. And it'll be so interesting to see how this, I think is it 2 people who are taking over for Cook? Is that what has been decided?
Yeah.
It'll be so interesting to see how, I think of Microsoft, this tension of perform and transform. Mm-hmm. I think of Microsoft, I think has done a really, on the whole, push back if you disagree, please. On the whole, Microsoft has done a very nice job, 50 plus years of this, navigating that tension of perform and transform and really staying relevant. If they were still sending out CD-ROMs, we wouldn't have Microsoft anymore, right? Yeah. But they've done a really nice job of that. And it'll be interesting to see how Apple, because some of just yesterday, I was like, I hate you, Siri. I lost my emotional intelligence with Siri because it's been the same. Or Google with, how do you monetize and get revenue from LLMs? Because it's going to be Gemini. I no longer really go to Google to find things out. I go to Claude.
I write about this in my book, about the dynamic tension between getting trapped, the management paradox I talk about. It, you want to lock everything down and have it be repeatable and predictable. That's what the stock market wants. But that's a fool's errand, because everything on the outside and inside is changing. So you have to balance this tension to constantly be changing, but also deliver results. And it's hard. It's a hard balancing act.
So I'm going to switch gears on you right now, and I hope that's okay. But it's in the close cousin to what we've been discussing, if not completely connected. I think it is. You just mentioned it. I was with a banking group this week, and the amount of, I think back in Cotter's day, where it was like, hey, you're going to do a change? Here's the 8 steps. And I'm listening to these folks, and We've had this number of, I'm going to say chief technology officer. That's not the example, but we've had 3 in the last 4 years. We have this going on. This is happening. This is occurring. Digitization, tariffs, Strait of Hormuz. Just go down the list, come back to office. The number of changes that these folks are navigating and the scope of them, it's really fascinating. So it's almost like an existence in permanent whitewater as you just,
Yep.
it's like you're just going down the rapids and they're going to be category 4. And every once in a while you have a stretch where it's cat 3, but strap in, buckle up.
I absolutely see it. And where I get in trouble, Scott, is the CEOs who come to me and say, oh, woe is me. What am I going to do? I just push back and say, sorry, TS. That's your reality. Man up, because it's not going to get any better, and you whining about it is not going to change it. And that's when most of my consulting engagements get ended. They don't want to hear it. But that's the reality that the CEO has to hear is, okay, sorry, it's complex and it's hard, but if that's your reality, somebody else is going to take advantage of that. Somebody's going to learn through it and change and adapt to it. And if you don't, we'll put you on the dustbin of companies that couldn't get through it either. So that's the sort of tough love that I try to bring, but it's hard. It just feels like everything is changing all the time. And that gets back to a concept I think we've talked about before, is that there is a medical model of stress where ambiguity leads to uncertainty and feelings of anxiety. And if you don't resolve those, that leads to all what I call the outs: burnout, dropout, pass outs.
Yeah.
And management's job is to put a filter of certainty in that ambiguity. It put a lens that says, yes, all that's problematic, but people are going to make up their own story about how you're responding to it.
This is not a well-formulated thought, but what are some of those principles for better preparing individuals to just exist in that permanent whitewater? Don't expect, and I come across individuals in organizational life that almost expect as if it's going to slow down, if it's going to get back to normal, quote unquote. And again, global competition, digitization, you just go down the list.
But here's my solution that I tried in all my companies, and I try to work with my clients, and that is make strategy an everyday event. Yeah. And the good news is, in this day and age with Teams and the cloud and AI, you can be tracking those critical assumptions you've made in the outside world, in your external environment, on a regular basis and storing it where everybody can see, and you can summarize it for people so that you're building the people's awareness of those changes as they go. Now, when everybody has access to it and you can chirp out a summary of where we are anytime, you can keep people pretty informed. It doesn't make it any easier, but at least you're putting that filter of certainty in place that people know what's going on. They understand the changes that are coming. They may not like them, but they can hopefully understand them and see them.
I've been ending the podcast lately by just asking guests, what's the practical wisdom in this conversation? In a topic that doesn't always feel practical, but what is the practical wisdom for you?
My students and my customers and clients are tired of hearing me say it, but systems thinking is a world. It helps you see the world. And so if you can really embrace it, it's not a solution. It is not a tool. It's just a way of viewing the world that hopefully brings greater clarity. So I embrace systems thinking wherever I go.
More and more is probably foundational to someone having a level of success when they're in a position of authority, right? It is an incredibly important topic when it comes to individuals being successful when serving in these positions of authority.
And what's interesting, Scott, is as I've introduced it to freshmen and even high schoolers, most of their time, their response is, wow, now I see it, because they've been living in these systems all their lives.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to see the dynamics and the distinctions and the relationships differently. Yeah. And so I think people can understand it often we train leaders to not see the system, and they come out of finance or they come out of this area. And so I think starting early and then getting everybody in all of my corporate universities, we started with critical thinking and then systems thinking. And then, oh, by the way, here are all of our systems and how we view the world at this company.
Okay, sir. I appreciate you. We will do it again. I appreciate it.
Great to see you again. And thank you so much.
Take care. Be well.
Okay.
You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.